In this video discussion, we're going to continue our conversation about the Western way of awakening. Now, the Western way, as opposed to the Eastern way, in the West, we tend to use logic and reason. We like to see cause and effect. We want to see evidence. We want to have an explanation of how and why things occur. That is opposed to the more Eastern tradition of where they would use meditation, knowledge would come by revelation, and yoga and physical practices that alter the mental state and change their perceptions. Now, both of these ways will eventually both lead to a change in belief because of direct experience, but they both offer a very different path. As we said in the previous video discussion, that meditation can, of course, lead to direct knowledge, and concentration, which is a more Western technique, focuses in on detail to drill down to the explanation. And concentration, done long enough and assiduously enough, can lead into a natural type of meditation. But the reverse is not true. Meditation won't lead into concentration. That's not the nature of it. So previously, we first created a belief about nature itself, of course, leaving room for doubt. Now, during these discussions, when we finally eradicate that doubt, then the Western way of awakening will have properly begun. Our first belief that we created was that there was a greater nature, that nature preceded our birth and is subsequent to our death. That there's a nature before we came and there'll be a nature after our lives are over. That nature itself is greater than this three-dimensional reality that we know now. This being established, then we proceeded to consider that we ourselves then are part of that greater nature, that we came from and existed before our birth, and that, as is the mostly understood understanding, that we in some form continue after our death. Now, we will get into all those considerations of pre-birth and after death, but right now we're just establishing that hypothesis that we are part of a greater nature. We were before we came into this limited dimensions, and we will be again after we conclude our life here. So now we continue our understanding that our greater purpose began and ends within the greater nature that exists. So that being established, that nature is greater than our three-dimensional reality, and within this greater nature, your purpose and everyone's purpose then began before being born. It was from this greater nature from which you came and to which you will return. These are fully functional planes of existence. even more so than our three-dimensional plane, because they have greater dimensions. But that's for a different topic and a further discussion. So understanding that and understanding the first agreement, the very first agreement that you began this experience with, was to actually go through this experience. It was of your choosing, and that being understood, then we all are but emissaries to this reality, this three-dimensional reality. There are others elsewhere, of course. So the point being that since it was your choosing, that you are basically an emissary here. You are going to stay for a short term, and then you are going to return. And so your purpose, as we just previously stated, lies within those boundaries. But all in all, it's a very natural process that you are experiencing. Now, you have to ask yourself the question, does that feel right to you? That question is asked because that, in part, is our greater nature of communication. In our material world, we are very visual. We see and then we feel. But in the spiritual body, it's just the reverse, just the opposite. We feel to see. So that's why the question was asked, does that feel right to you? Because that will automatically take you closer to your spiritual body than your material, your intellectual body. And if that's a concept that you can hold, and of course, properly, you can have some doubt until we establish the route to a direct experience, then as any emissary or any ambassador to a foreign land, you have functions, you have duties, and you have responsibilities. These are what we're going to talk about in greater detail, along with the direct spiritual channel of communication that an emissary uses to further their functions and responsibilities and duties. But for now, we'll briefly begin with responsibilities, which we probably will break up into several video discussions. So from this greater nature from which you came, the seed of awareness was implanted at your birth. And this is the critical aspect of our being. Now, awareness may grow from two different perspectives. The first, which becomes part of the socialization process, is that we become aware of our dimensional existence, its limitations, its challenges, and its inventions, etc. The inventions may be arbitrary moral codes, religious beliefs, political allegiance, and other things, as well as the psychology of the ego, all the things that exist in this three-dimensional material plane. Now, second, and opposite this perspective, we may become aware of that which is not limited by our rationales, logic, and reason. An example would be a greater functionality than meets our dimensional boundaries of the eye and other senses. In other words, things that are unseen but are felt and we come to know to be true. This would be for the purposes which are not artificially invented or manufactured, but are strictly and inherently part of our nature and part of the greater nature. Now, this seed of awareness, which is our responsibility, our duty, and we are functionally dedicated to grow the seed of awareness, like any living part of a garden, grows naturally. So your awareness is going to grow whether you apply and concentrate and try to gain a greater understanding. It's going to grow or not. It's a natural thing. So with or without our knowledge and understanding or consent, our awareness is going to grow. That is the paradox. Awareness defines the existence in which we live, and the struggle to attain it does not indebт us to be concerned about our purpose. So this in part establishes the duality, the paradox that we live in of being both material and spiritual at the same time. And as we continue to live in this limited three-dimensional realities, we're going to determine how to decide our values within this paradox, how we're going to choose to establish our beliefs. Now, in the strictly material world, our beliefs are a bit disjointed. They don't make a clearly intelligible system for all our actions and gestures, because we only can perceive part of the greater nature. It's not until we come to form the beliefs and have the beliefs, again, through direct experience of the greater nature that we are part of, that our beliefs can really be complete and holistic. And as we just explained a bit earlier about the different way of which we go through our daily lives, it all depends on how we choose to learn to see. Whether we see by vision or we feel to see. So the way that we do this, the way that we choose to see, that manifests our values, our behaviors, and ultimately our choices and functionalities. We can choose to be strictly a material person, a worldly person, and that would be our choice, and it would lead to a particular belief system. But we also may choose to believe that we are part of a greater nature which exists beyond our evident three dimensions, and that would lead us to a different belief system and different perceptions. So we'll just end on this note in this video discussion and carry on our conversation about responsibilities in the next video discussion. But our nurtured awareness then, remember, nurturing awareness, growing awareness, actually becoming more aware where we're living in a heightened awareness, so to speak, presents an interesting dilemma within this paradox of which we're living. The dilemma occurs as we must use the supreme logic and reason of our mind to convince the mind itself that it's not supreme. So that's where we'll take up in the next video discussion as we proceed in understanding and employing this simple, not necessarily easy, Western way of awakening and attaining enlightenment.